corner here as you walk in the door is the actual Open Meeting Act. If you would, we're going to ask that you stand with us for just a moment of silence and as well the Pledge of Allegiance. And Beth, we'll ask you to do roll call.
Granquist.
Here.
Laney.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
Clausen.
Here.
Murin. Moaning.
Here.
Faust.
Here.
File.
Here.
Under action items tonight, I'm looking for approval of the consent agenda as provided you.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion with a second to approve the consent agenda. I need your vote, please.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
All right, and as well approval of the full agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion with a second to approve the full agenda. Again, your vote, please.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Okay, we're going to start off with public hearing tonight. First on the list is a public hearing to consider a blighted and substandard declaration for the area referred to as the Skyline Apartments redevelopment area, generally located on the north side of West Norfolk Avenue between 12th Street and 13th Street. I will open the hearing, and who's going to come forward and speak to this first?
Hi.
And you know the routine, I believe, Miss.
I'm sorry, Sue, what'd you say?
If you will sign in for us.
Oh, I've done that already.
Great.
Yeah, we're ahead of the game on that one.
Thank you.
So I'm Jan Merrill with Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District. And the district, with the approval of the city of Norfolk, is under contract with Wishrock Housing Partners and Investment Group to conduct a blight and substandard study, which was known as the Skyline Redevelopment Area. Now, according to the Nebraska Community Development Law, they have identified 6 substandard factors and 16 blight factors to look for in blight studies. And we have identified 5 each of the blight and the substandard in the Skyline Redevelopment Area. So a couple of those is the deterioration of, there are 4 buildings in the Skyline Redevelopment Area, and 3 of them have the rating of poor or fair, which makes that 75%. Also, another strong factor is the age of the buildings over there. The structure's average is 71.33%. There's also inadequate ventilation in the apartments. They do not have an air seal program, and the lack of the air seal program allows airs and odors to transfer between the units, and that allows contaminants to pass between the apartments, and that is some real poor air quality. There's also the condition that endangers life and property by fire. The building does have standpipes, but the only area that has sprinkler systems is the garbage chutes. And in event of a fire, it would take considerable amount of time to have professionals in there to be able to hook up to the standpipes for the fire suppression. So there's a real danger there. The smoke detectors in all the units are only battery powered. They are not hardwired, which is something that would help out with would be a danger in the fire. And lastly, the current layout of the back entrance of the building has caused us for concern because it's very difficult for the fire trucks to get in that area. And so that would be another endangerment of life by fire. And then the last condition that is an issue is for the ill health and safety. The windows are mounted in panels that have asbestos in it, and they do not have operator limits on them. And so if the tenants want to, they can get out on those ledges The carpets in the apartments are very unsanitary. Unclean carpets can contain fungus and other irritants, which can cause respiratory issues, allergies, skin irritations, and infections. The handrails that are located in the stairwells, they are not current to code. They're not up to current code, and which causes, there could be some unsafe conditions for the tenants there. And there are some deficiencies in a report from the Nebraska Chief Elevator Inspector regarding the age of the elevator and the lack of current ADA and UFAC codes, and that brings some health and safety issue to the welfare of the tenants.
How old is that building, Jan? Did you say that? I know it's got to be over 40, obviously.
It's like in the 70s. I have it right here,
Okay.
Sue. It was built in 72, so it's 44 years old.
Thank you. Any questions for Jan while she's before you?
Is this going to stay income-based?
That, you'll have to ask the developer on that, because I'm just with the blight study, so I don't know the answers to that.
So the blighted area, that, I know that is more than just the apartments there, because I know we have a couple councilmen who live in that area. I think it includes at least one of theirs or two, and that's pretty nice areas. So does that include some of the other homes in that area?
The only house it does include is Josh's.
Okay, none behind it over on Nebraska?
Nope.
Okay, and so they're looking at this solely just to repair their apartments. I don't recall ever doing it just to help apartments. We do a lot for infrastructure and that, but, so it's just to repair the apartments? Are they going to repair the things that you just talked about, or?
Again, I did the blight
Blight,
determination
okay.
study. If you're going to ask about the project itself, then there's representatives
Okay.
here, and
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jan.
thank you.
All right, with that being said, I'm going to come forward and we'll ask you to state your name and sign in for us if you would. Please.
Good evening. My name is Colton Venteicher. I'm an attorney with Bacon and Vinton out of Gothenburg. We are a firm that's been working with the development agency and the developer and moving this process along. So my role here tonight is to open up for any questions any of you all may have with respect to the community development law as it relates to this issue of this blighted and substandard study of this area.
So Councilman Faust, so you want to go ahead?
Shane, you want to go first? Okay. So the question I just asked her is this is just for the apartments, and are you going to remodel just what she talked about, like the windows and the carpets and?
I could not speak with particularity on what specifically will be redeveloped as it relates to this project. I'm not, I guess, aware of that. My partner, Mike Bacon, has been the individual who has been working for the most part with this project. I will tell you that under the community development law, as you mentioned, there is an allowance for improvements to public infrastructure, public utility, general public welfare. So I will say that if that scope expanded outside of just those specific items that were spoken about in the blight study, that obviously it would be our goal to make sure that stayed within the confines of the statute.
And that person that I would need to ask any is not here, is he?
He is not here this evening. And I should say, Mr. Bacon apologizes. He had a prior engagement and he couldn't make it, so.
I do know that we have certainly our own economic development person here who's been involved in that. So maybe Andy, unless there's more questions here for this gentleman before you as the attorney.
Is this going to, my only question was, is it going to stay income-based? I know that,
And I'm not,
I know they're
I guess I'm
turning
not privy to
into
that information.
full rent apartments, or if they're using, going to stay with the cap contracts they have now.
I believe the goal, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe the goal is to remain under the low-income housing tax credits.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about just the general requirements for an area to be blighted in accordance with state law.
Right,
Name a
so,
couple
so
of
in order to move this process along with this redevelopment project, the city must first declare the area to be blighted and substandard. And I guess that was spoken a little bit about from the department, the Economic Development Agency with a study. But under the terms of the statute, and this is 18-2103, Section 10 and 11 is where the statute defines blighted and substandard. So the statute sets forth those requirements for a blighted area. It says an area which by reason of the presence of, and then it lists a good amount of factors, but you only need one of those factors, a substantial number of deteriorated or deteriorating structures. I believe that was one that was met under the study. The insanitary or unsafe conditions, the existence of conditions which endanger life or property by fire and other causes. So then we take those factors and we say, by reason of the presence of one of those factors, does that substantially impair or arrest the sound growth of the community? Does it retard the provision of housing accommodations? Or, so again, you only need one of these three, does it constitute an economic or social liability? In addition to that, they have another and. The statute likes to throw the ors and ands around, a little bit difficult to read, but it also says, and it is detrimental to the public health, safety, morals, or welfare in its present condition and use. And again, is there the presence of one of these factors, at least one, and I think the one we are looking at here is the average age of the residential or commercial units in the area is at least 40 years. I believe the average age in this case was in the 70s. So under the definition for substandard, you pull a lot of the similar factors. Again, it says an area in which there is a predominance of buildings or improvements, which by reason of just one of these factors, dilapidation, deterioration, age, or obsolescence. Again, I believe those were met according to the study. Does that factor, is that conducive to ill health, transmission of disease, infant mortality, juvenile delinquency, and crime? And also, is that detrimental to the public wealth, the safety, the morals, or the welfare of the community?
Thank you.
I would think in this instance, you pretty much have to make those improvements, because if you don't those improvements, your assessed value doesn't go up, so your TIF bond, you're not covering your TIF bond at the end of the project. Is that
Right, and that's, I guess the TIF bond comes along when you set forth the project, the redevelopment project to make those improvements. So without that project to make those improvements, you don't have that bond.
you don't have an end? See, we're used to, well, not real used, but we're used to providing TIF for single-family home lots development, you know, so we're used to the improvement costs that go into there, and then we've kind of got a handle on how the TIF bonds are established, or how the value of the TIF bond is established off the assessed value of the improvements that are made to the property, which essentially are the homes. You know, so in this situation, it's the TIF bond is established from the current assessed value, and then the final assessed value after the improvements are done, and the difference between the two.
That is correct. So you look at the incremental value that the redevelopment project is going to create for that property, and determine the assessment based on that, and then we go back and look and see what the value of the bond should be. That's
So
correct.
this project will continue to always pay taxes on that main, it's the value of the tax, the appraised value right now.
Correct.
That
So-
won't change. So that will just keep coming to the city of Norfolk, the schools, the college, and so on. But the difference between the final assessed value, then that money goes back to refund the bond, the TIF bond.
Correct. So you have that baseline value that, as you said, those funds continue to go to the taxing agencies. But that incremental value, that value that you're creating from your redevelopment, goes to pay off this TIF bond. Now, I'll point out that the maximum term for these bonds can be 15 years. Obviously, if the value were to increase at a faster rate, that bond gets paid off quicker, and then those funds spread out into the other taxing agencies at a quicker rate.
Okay?
Mayor,
Any other-
Council, if I may, I might shed a little bit of clarity on some of the questions I think they'll be asking. First, keep in mind that this is the blight and substandard study portion is on your agenda tonight only. Then there's going to be a redevelopment plan, most likely as actually developed here. I got a draft in front of me that the developers are working on as they proceed through the tax increment financing piece of this, which will come at a later date. So you're not making a decision tonight on tax increment finance or the uses of that, but there's some clarity that's being provided there. But as I read through the draft plan, just to answer some of the questions that Councilman Faustin had there, sprinkler system, new alarm system, relocation of main electrical panels, hardwired smoke detection, emergency lighting, elevator rehabilitation, window replacement, updates to ADA and UFAS code, and a complete rehabilitation of the stair railings to bring it up to code, are just some of the things they highlighted. And they did point out that this was for elderly and vulnerable population, and they continue to, their plan is to continue to serve that population. That's in the draft redevelopment plan that we put on.
Any other questions for him?
All right,
Thank
thank you for your time.
Appreciate you being here. Okay, anyone else that wants to come forward and speak to this? Scott?
Mayor and Council, good evening. I will take just a moment of your time. I've watched in earnest the development of this project and see how it worked. And I take note, a special note of the letter, Mayor, that you signed in July regarding the subcommittee's recommendation to specifically address the public safety concerns with this building. And I just want to go on record from the fire department's behalf and say thank you for taking that serious. Thank you for making that investment in public safety. If you do consider this proposal, to you and the developer for making that public safety element part of this project. This building, just simply because of the amount of residential tenants in multi-story dwelling, creates some challenges from a fire safety perspective. To not have a full automatic fire sprinkler system throughout is a big deal. And to include that as part of this redevelopment plan and make that part of the investment in this is a wonderful thing in the eyes of the firefighters in Norfolk Fire. So I just want to say thank you for that consideration. It brings incredible comfort to us to know that should this occur, that property is going to be protected in a manner that it hasn't been for all these years. So a substantial gain from where we are to where we would be going. And if the council includes that, I just want to go on record as saying how much we appreciate you taking that consideration and making it a priority in this project, because it's very, very important to public safety. So I want to thank you all for that.
Scott, that's what we're here for, is make the right decision for this community. I had the opportunity, it's probably been 2-3 years, maybe 3-4 years ago when they first started talking about this and meeting the gentleman from Wishrock. And certainly when he came into my office and talked about their investment in each and every one of the apartment rooms, it was huge, huge investment. And obviously, I don't know that the numbers that they first brought forward were the actual. So they kind of had to take a step back and certainly ask for some additional help. So I believe that this is a great process for us to be able to offer, certainly with your input as well, the fact of let's make it a safe place. So appreciate your coming forward and speaking to it.
Thank you for your
All right.
consideration, all of you.
Anybody have questions for Scott?
I don't have any questions for Scott, but thanks for what you said. But I do want to make just a note for the record. We have a ceiling on how much how much blight substandard we can have in the community. And one of the nice things about this particular project, I think, is it doesn't move that needle at all.
Right.
Hardly. I don't know what the square footage is or the acreage is or anything, but I think to have the ability to do that on such a small piece of ground for such a big benefit is really nice.
Right.
Well stated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly make a comment too, that it was noted that I'm next door neighbors to this property. And to echo the mayor's comments, the property owner right from the beginning has been open and transparent and very careful about their approach to redevelopment in this facility. And I think when you look at TIF, and the original intent of TIF was redevelopment of older areas, facilities in a community that have seen some deterioration, that this falls really in line with that original intent. So I'm hopeful if the development plan comes forward that we'll be open to moving forward with this.
Okay. Thanks, Councilman. Anyone else wants to speak to this? Again, we'd ask you to state your name and sign in for us, if you would, please.
My name is Bruce Finley. I'm wondering, the building, it's owned by a private owner, not the city?
City does not own it.
Okay. And the money comes from, how is it given to them? Is it leftover funds that the city hasn't spent, or how do they get the money for it?
Money is generated on the increase in valuation for the property. As it gets improved, there's a base valuation now. So say, for an example, say the base valuation is $1,000, and then you make the improvements to the building, and the valuation becomes $10,000. There's a incremental valuation that is taxed in there accordingly, and those tax dollars between $1,000 and $10,000 is where the dollars come in part, just in part, to rehabilitate this building. There's many other financial funding sources that the developer has at their disposal, and they're using into this system.
I see. So they're getting a tax break for doing this, or how does that work?
No, not a tax break. No, it's an increase in valuation. It's tax increment finance.
They're applying for grants to try and get this money to help them make this worth more money. Then it'll be taxed higher, and then the TIF will take effect.
All right. So, but the money, the grant money, where does that come from?
The government probably.
No,
There
it's
is
the
no
developer, or a bank, one of the two. They finance the TIF bond.
Right.
The city has nothing to do with the TIF bond. And then the difference that like what Mr. Widener was talking about, the incremental increase, the taxes off that amount of increase paid for the TIF bond.
So you give them
So
a
the
tax
person-
break on the increase of the property's value?
No.
We're not giving any break.
I'm not sure.
That's okay,
I
understand,
I-
understand, but take it back, just as Shane was sharing with you. The value of it right now is, would you use $1,000?
$1,000, just
And
say
so
for
let's say
example.
the taxes on that $1,000 are, what amount? We're gonna say
Yes.
500 for a round number.
Yeah.
Just because I don't know,
Right.
but now with the improvements that have been done, this $10,000 valuation is going to create many more tax dollars. This 500 goes away. It is now probably 5 times, 10 times that amount, I don't know. But that difference in taxes that's coming in is what is being used to finance that bond.
So instead of going to the taxing entities, those dollars go in to pay off the bond.
Right.
The same taxes are generated.
We get to keep the 500, the original 500 will
Right.
continue to come in, because if
It'll
we
still be
didn't do
taxed.
something to it, it would never change. This is a great benefit for the community, for the folks that are living in there. Because of the increased value, there's the ability to use those dollars, but once that bond is paid for, then we're all gonna,
I understand. Then, once the bond's paid for, then the city gets the taxes on the higher value
all
property.
entities would get their fair share.
All right. I am definitely against this, and I encourage you to vote against this, because I don't feel that the city should be deciding this sort of thing. I feel this leads to picking winners and losers. I think what I would love for the city to do in place of this is to be a mediator that brings the community together for a donation effort to help improve this private property. I really worry about the city encouraging this sort of collusion to decrease taxes on property that's improved. At the same time, I must also state I'm also against the property tax. Thanks.
All
Just to
right.
be clear, there's no collusion. The city isn't doing any collusion to decrease any tax values. There's no decrease in tax values. In fact, there'll be increases in tax value.
I understand the tax value will increase on the property, but the amount you will pull in for maybe 15 years will be locked in at what it is now. This is something that shouldn't go on, I believe. I don't think this helps, and it opens the door for all kinds of under-the-table collusion and stuff, and I just don't like seeing it in my city. That's all.
All right, anyone else that wants to come forward and speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Andy Colvin, Norfolk Area Economic Development. I'll just want to go on the record as well as supporting the Blight and Substandard study. And again, I'll just echo a little bit about what Shane mentioned earlier, is that this step will just define the area for redevelopment to take place, for one thing. So we'll go down the road with the redevelopment agreement and working some of those things out further down the road. But I will say that this is a good opportunity for investment, and I'm glad to see this in Norfolk, and I hope to see more.
All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Andy. Thank you. Anyone else that wants to come forward and speak to this? If not, do we have a planning commission report on this?
Yes. The Norfolk Planning Commission reviewed the blight and substandard determination study for the area referred to as Skyline Apartment Redevelopment Area on November 8, 2016. The study comprises approximately 2.11 acres, which includes 2 properties on West Norfolk Avenue. Based on the study and its findings, the Planning Commission recommends approval for declaration of the Skyline Apartment Redevelopment Area as blighted and substandard with an 8-0 vote.
All right, and with that, I will close this hearing and ask for consideration of Resolution 2016-59, declaring the area generally located on the north side of West Norfolk Avenue between 12th and 13th Street, referred to as the Skyline Apartment Redevelopment Area, as blighted and substandard.
Your Honor, I would offer consideration of Resolution 2016-59.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. I would ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, Resolution 2016-59 is adopted.
All right. And next is a public hearing to amend the City Code, Section 27-142, 27-143, and 27-401 to change multiple family dwellings from a permissible use to a conditional use in OD Office District. I will open the hearing, and I would assume, Val, you're going to be the one that talks to it.
Yes, this OD amendment is proposed to change the text and the land use matrix for OD to remove the multifamily dwellings from a permitted use to a conditional use, so that there's a way that then this body and Planning Commission can look at the different areas possible for OD that would maybe be more appropriate for multifamily, and then some OD areas that may not be appropriate for multifamily, but it still gives the option out there to ask the question.
Okay. Any questions of Val? Public hearing. Anyone else that wants to speak to this or may have questions? Quiet council. All right, if no further discussion, Planning Commission report. Beth?
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on November 8, 2016 to consider amending the official city code to change multifamily dwellings from permissible use to conditional use in OD Office District. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the amendment with an 8-0 vote.
All right, with that, I will close the hearing, and we're asking for consideration of ordinance number 5438, approving the amendment as stated from a permissible use to a conditional use in OD Office District.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance 5438.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Are we ready to vote, please? Whoop, short title. I'm sorry, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend sections 27-142 and 27-143 of the official city code to change multiple family dwellings from permitted uses to conditional uses in zoning district OD, to amend section 27-401 to reflect said change in the land use matrix, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
And with that, I would ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5438 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I'd move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5438 on second and third reading.
Second?
All right, we have a motion with a second to suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5438 on second and third. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5438 carries on second and third.
All right, and under the regular agenda, consideration of ordinance number 5431, approving the zoning change from A Ag District to OD, which is Office District, on property addressed at 3204 West Benjamin Avenue. This ordinance, 5431, was tabled at the September 19th council meeting and pulled from the October 3rd city council agenda at the request of the applicant. Ordinance number 5431 passed on the first reading at the October 17th, 2016 city council meeting and on second reading at the November 7th city council meeting. With that,
Your Honor, I'll introduce ordinance 5431 on third reading.
Second?
all right, we have a motion and we have a second to pass on third reading. Please vote.
Voting in favor of ordinance 5431 on third reading, council members Lange, Merrill, Clausen, Moaning, Faust, File. Voting against the ordinance, Councilman Granquist, absent, Councilman Murin. Ordinance 5431 carries on third reading.
All right, and next is consideration of ordinance number 5439, amending section 13-80 of the city code to provide that telecommunication services subject to the city's 3% occupation tax are the same telecommunication services subject to the city's sales tax. I'm looking for,
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance number 5439 on first reading.
Second.
all right, we have a motion with a second, and I believe, Randy, we're looking to you to give us a little bit of explanation here.
Yes, Your Honor. The last time we changed our telecommunications occupation tax was back in 2006. Before that, it applied to landlines only. In 2006, we expanded it to include cellular phone service or wireless telephone service. And at that time, we had the intent of making, for purposes of simplicity, to make it so that what was subject to the city's sales tax was also subject to our occupation tax. At that time, voice over internet protocol was relatively new, and it wasn't real clear whether or not that was something that you could tax or not. Our understanding was basically that you couldn't. Since that time, there's been various legislation and various court actions that made it clearer and clearer that voice over internet protocol is something you can tax. And back in 2006, when we passed that original change to telecommunications occupation tax ordinance, to try and make it match the state sales tax, we took the verbiage out of the state sales tax regulations and statutes and put that into our ordinance. Well, that's changed several times since we've passed that. And now the state has clearly stated that, the state of Nebraska, that voice over internet protocol is subject to sales tax. It was our intent to have what was subject to sales tax be subject to our occupation tax. So to make our ordinance simpler, what we have done is simply reference state sales tax regulations And this ordinance says if it's subject to state sales, City of Norfolk sales tax under the state sales tax regulations, those telecommunication services are subject to our occupation tax. And that brings in voice over internet protocol clearly, whereas our ordinance before was somewhat confusing, and some places it referred to switch telecommunication services, but then there was some broad overarching language. It talked about any way you communicate voice, that it is subject to tax. It was really somewhat conflicting, not clear. This makes it clear and has an effective date of January 1, 2017. So if this ordinance is passed after that date, clearly voice over internet protocol will be subject to our sales tax. And that's the main, probably the only impact that I'm aware of that this ordinance will have, is make voice over internet protocol subject to the city's occupation tax, whereas before it wasn't clear whether or not it was or was not subject to our occupation tax.
So all that being said, Randy, that was a mouthful. As a citizen, what does that do to me? Where am I going to see this?
I would think most citizens would not be impacted by this, but those that are getting their telephone service using voice over internet protocol, Cable One, I believe, is the biggest provider of that in Norfolk. Those people getting that service from Cable One may see that occupation tax pass through to them on their Cable One bills. It's not like a sales tax where it's a tax on the consumer. An occupation tax is a tax on the business, so it doesn't have to be separately stated on the bill.
It does
Most
not.
businesses, when they're subject to an occupation tax, do pass that on to the consumer as a separate item on the bill. That's not required, but that's how most of them do it. I would expect that's how these voice over internet protocol providers will do it. So if you get your telephone service with voice over internet protocol, I'd expect you'd see a 3% occupation tax line item on your phone bill. But that wouldn't be required like it would be if it was a sales tax, or that is a tax on the consumer, and law requires that to be separately stated. This is a tax on the business based on the revenues they receive from the voice over internet protocol.
Okay, good explanation.
Randy, along that same line, so I have a hard line. I'm paying this occupation tax on my hard line.
Yes.
Okay, so it's leveling playing field out,
That's
actually.
exactly right. You'll be, if you get your phone service over the hard line like you're talking about, Jim, you've been paying it since the 60s.
I know.
If you get
I just wanted to state it, so.
If you get your phone service with a cell phone like I've got in my pocket, I've been paying that occupation tax since 2006. If you get it with voice over internet protocol, it wasn't clear before whether that should be taxed or not. So I'm not sure whether you were paying that or not. And this ordinance says of January 1, 2017, it would be clear that that is subject to the city's 3% occupation tax. It would level the playing field, whether you're picking up a phone that's wired in your house, you're picking up your cell phone out of your pocket, or whether you're picking up a phone that goes through the internet to get you your service. Either way, you're paying the 3% city occupation tax.
Okay. All right, any other questions, comments? Mr. Finley?
Yes. Is the city making enough money now? Is it in the green? You're
Well,
not
I'm
in.
sure hoping so, but I will, I mean, it's,
Has the budget been balanced, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, our budget's required to be balanced every year.
I don't think it's a good idea to continue to put the occupation tax on businesses. I believe it should be rolled back and you should be getting rid of it.
appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else that wants to come forward and speak? Okay. Seeing none then, no further discussion, council. I'm going to look for a short title from you, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 13-80 of the Official City Code to provide that the telecommunications services subject to the city's 3% occupation tax are the same telecommunication services subject to the city's sales tax, and thereby clarify that voice over internet protocol service is subject to said occupation tax, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
All right, and with that, I would ask you to vote on ordinance 5439.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5439 carries on first reading.
Here and I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5439 on second and third.
Second?
All right, we have a motion with a second to suspend the rules on ordinance number 5439 and pass on second and third reading. Any further discussion? Then I would ask for you to vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5439 carries on second and third.
Okay, and next is consideration of ordinance 5440, approving the first addendum to the lease purchase agreement between the city and the City of Norfolk Facilities Corp. For the city administration building in connection with refunding of the existing Facilities Corporation bonds issued for the administration building, approving the related mortgage, trust indenture, and security agreement, and improving the execution of documents with respect to refunding the Facilities Corporation bonds. Ooh. Do I have a...
Your Honor, I would offer for consideration ordinance number 5440.
Second that, Your Honor.
All right, we have a motion with a second. And with all that, Randy, we're looking back to you.
Yes, Your Honor. The building we're sitting in now is the building we're talking about, the financing for that. Technically, the city doesn't own this building. The City of Norfolk Facilities Corporation owns this building, and the City of Norfolk is leasing it from the Facilities Corp. Our lease payments equal to debt service payments. When this is all paid off, the title of the building will transfer to the city. The $1.9 million of bonds issued in 2011 are currently callable, and interest rates have went down substantially since then, and we can realize a substantial savings by refunding those bonds. So this is just a simple refunding that has it's an additional layer of lease purchase language on top of it. Public Facilities Corp. Board of Directors met on November 8th and approved this refunding, subject to the city approval of the changes to the lease purchase agreement and other documents that go along with that. So they've already approved it. I had Emeritus, our financial advisor, do a refunding analysis at that time. At that time, we were looking at about $186,000 savings. That was a net present value savings. That was as of November 7th. And I ran that for the Facilities Corp. They met on November 8th, which was Election Day. Donald Trump got elected president. And since then, interest rates have skyrocketed. They've went up almost 0.5% on municipal bonds. So the refunding is still looking good, but we're not looking at a net present value savings of $186,000. It's more like $146,000. That's still well over 9%, about 9.7% of the refunded principal. And I recommend we go ahead with this. Our normal policy is if it's between 4% and 5%, we'll do a refunding. So this, because, well, I'm not sure if it's because Donald Trump got elected or what, but interest rates went way up between the time the Facilities Corp approved this and tonight's meeting. We won't know what those interest rates will actually be until November 30th, which is when we're requesting the bids back from the banks on these bonds. So interest rates could turn around and bring that savings back up. They could continue to go up and drive that savings down, but they'd have to go down a long ways. Or savings would have to go down a long ways because interest rates went up a long ways before this one looked like a good refunding. So I'm recommending that the council approve this refunding.
Okay, we're counting on you. Any questions for him at all? If not, how about a short title, Bill?
An ordinance authorizing execution and delivery of a first addendum to lease purchase agreement with the City of Norfolk Facilities Corporation, amending and confirming the terms of a lease purchase agreement relating to the acquisition and leasing of a City Hall building for the City of Norfolk, approving the execution of documents with respect to said first addendum, approving the terms of a mortgage, trust indenture, and security agreement, making certain determinations with respect to bonds to be issued under such indenture, providing for the refunding of certain outstanding bonds, approving the terms of a bond purchase agreement, approving post-issuance compliance policy and procedures, and providing for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Not too bad. With that, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5440 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, as noted, since this is somewhat time sensitive, I move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5440 on second and third reading.
Second that.
All right, we have a motion with a second to suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5440 on second and third. Good comment there, Councilman Lange. No further discussion? Again, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5440 carries on second and third.
All right, and last is consideration of ordinance 5441, amending section 18-51 of this code to provide for one additional non-voting member to the Trail Advisory Board and to remove the residency requirement for a non-voting member of this Trail Advisory Board. Do I have a motion for consideration?
Your Honor, I move consideration of ordinance 5441 on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Who's speaking to this?
Just trying to, we're just always continually, Mayor and Council, we're always continually to try and enhance our trail advisory boards or any of the advisory boards, and this is one way we can do it, to have additional input from other folks as we look at our trails comprehensively as a community and garner all the support and crystal balling, for lack of better words, that we can, and that's what we're trying to do.
Great. It's been a very great group of folks.
It has been.
So to add to it, I think is very positive, so. Any questions at all? Comments? If not, a short title there.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend section 18-51 of the official city code to provide for one additional non-voting member of the Trail Advisory Board, to remove the residency requirement for a non-voting member of the Trail Advisory Board, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
All right, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5441 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I'd move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5441 on second and third reading.
Second.
All right, we have a motion with a second to suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5441 on second and third. Again, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5441 carries on second and third.
Okay, seeing nothing more on the agenda, we are adjourned.